just continue to get on. So Commissioner, if you want to start us off and.
Yeah, it's 1:30. I don't think we're premature.
Yeah.
All right, great. Welcome everybody. This is Thursday, June 12th. This is the meeting for Wasatch Front Economic Development District. Commissioner Gage I'll be conducting this morning as chair. I want to excuse our vice chair, Mayor Wynn. I think she's out of town for this meeting. We'll hope to see her next time. So anyway, we'll start the agenda as presented. Everybody should have copies of the agenda. The first item we're going to go through is our approval of the minutes for the meeting held on March 13th, 2025. I'd look for a motion to pass those or correct those minutes for that meeting on March 13th.
I'll make a motion to approve. Kelly Bush.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
And we've got a second. Thank you very much. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any
I'm
opposed?
sorry, who was the second? I missed it.
Who was the second?
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Okay.
Hey,
All right.
Commissioner, before we do that, I think if we could have Andrea run through just real quick the introductions, if we could, just make sure we have a roll call.
We'll just get that motion since we have on the table, then we'll go back to introduction. So
That's great.
I had a motion a second. I didn't hear any opposition, so I'm going to rule that motion passed. Those minutes for March 13th are approved as read. Let's now go back and we'll make sure that we introduce everybody online. Since this is a Zoom only meeting, I'm assuming we don't have anybody in person down at WFRC.
We do
Other
not.
than you.
It looks like we have Laura Hanson and Rosie. So
Okay. All right. Is Rosie going to take roll for us or go through that?
I think Andrea is.
And okay, go ahead.
All right. Today we have joining Marsha White, Andrea Pearson, Kelly Bush, Mike Moore, Gage Forer, Chris Sloan, Ted Knowlton, Andrew Gruber, Meg Padgen, Laura Hanson, Rosie Hernandez, Darren Brush, John A. Nardone, Blaine Fackrell, Marion Florence, Karen Lang, Michelle Larson, Rochelle Custer, Chanel Flores, Gwen Curvin, Che Mosqueda, Byron Head, Greg Bisping, Kirsten Swinyard, and Bryce Wurtzbaugh, and Muriel Sochimel. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Appreciate those taking time out of their afternoon to be with us. We've got a great agenda plan and two great presenters. So we look forward to hearing those reports. So we passed the minutes. Let's go now to my report. I'll make this short. As you're probably aware, our partners, including us, have continuing to work on our strategic plan, vision, and goals for the next year. We're already halfway through this year, so it seems like this year is going fast as well. The Wasatch Front Economic Development District, we continue to work on the strategic anchors that we've actually talked about and outlined in the comprehensive economic development strategy we call SIDS. The staff, including mostly Marcia, is gathering data and working to generate an annual report that we will share with members of the committee as soon as that's ready. I'm assuming that'll probably be sometime in the next 3 or 4 months. Is that right, Marcia? Do we have a time on that?
Yeah, hopefully sooner. We just finished the Wasatch Choice Vision, gathering the data that we did from all the workshops. And so Tim Watkins and our analytics team has been working really hard to get that information up and going. And so now that we have that data, we're going to put it together and get it out. I'm hoping within the next 4 or 5 weeks. So that's my plan.
Okay, next month or two. So that'd be great. Appreciate it, Marcia. All right, let's go to any questions or comments on the comprehensive economic development strategy or where we're headed. If none, let's go to our next agenda item, which is public comment. Do we have anyone online this afternoon that would like to make a comment or have a question? Seeing none, let's go to our next agenda item, which is what are site selectors looking for? I think as cities and counties, we've all dealt, especially recently, with interest in Utah, a number of calls, maybe visits from site selectors from outside this state, possibly inside the state, for businesses that are looking for expansion and or to enter into our area for future business, relocation, etc. So we just thought it'd be a good idea to go through and really look at site selection from the eyes of the site selectors. I know our team I don't know if Chris Roybal is able to join us today, has worked a great deal with probably some of the best site selectors across this country. So I'm going to turn the time over to Marcia. She's going to go through a slide that really tells us what site selectors look for and maybe give you some ideas of from their standpoint, from their world, when they come in to visit you, what they're looking for. So Marcia, do you want to do that? At the end of that, I'm going to ask any of our economic development directors if Chris Roybal jumps on, and because they all have good perspective of working with site selectors. So Marcia, take it over.
Thanks, Commissioner. Yeah, we thought it would be fun. I know because everybody loves Slido. I thought it'd be fun to run through this. So get your phones out, or if not, you can just, I guess, hit the next the number or there. But I'll give you a second to pull your phones out. We thought it'd be fun just to give you an idea of what site selectors are looking for as they come into our state and are wanting a lot from our state. So hopefully everybody knows how to use Slido, but I'll give you 5 more seconds.
There we go.
There it is. So so the first one is rank the top factors a site selector considers when moving from another state to a new location in Utah. So we know that the EDA really likes us to go out and try to get, and the state wants us to bring new business into the state. And so just trying to figure out from their perspective, what do they want, or what are the top factors are they looking for when they come into the state? And I think you just have to hit the number, and it will it will give you the ranking however you want it to be.
So Marcia, you're asking us to guess what we think
Yep.
are or
Yes.
use our information to say what we think, and then you're going to compare this group's of rating to what they actually look for?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yes, thanks for the clarification. See if I can. Just seeing if Chris is online. We went back and forth a little bit with these questions, so. I'll give it a few more seconds. So it looks like real estate availability and site readiness is coming up as number 1, accessibility to a good quality workforce, 2, the cost of doing business, the cost of living, quality of life for talent and attraction, utilities, and then it starts to move down: infrastructure, accessibility to markets, education and training. So I'm just gonna give you what they're looking for, maybe. So the first one that comes up for a site selector moving from another city or another state to a new location in Utah is that they really want the accessibility of a quality workforce. So the cost of doing business, that was up there. Interestingly enough, we ranked the real estate availability and site readiness as number 1 in our poll, but it actually falls to number 4. Incentives, they really want to know what they're going to get, what can they get from the city and cities and state, and then you can see their cost of living and quality of life are more at the bottom of what a site selector does when they come and they move from another state to a new location in Utah. Does that surprise anyone, I guess?
I think I find it interesting that accessibility to quality workforce is so high, and yet cost of living and those things rank significantly lower, as if there's no correlation there. I'm not sure that's the case.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Marcia, where did you get this information? I think that might.
Yeah, so I use the Google machine. So but I looked at 2 or 3 different sites, and some were actually coming from site selectors themselves of what they rank and how they rank and what they're looking at. So it's really it was a lot from the site selector, probably from their websites that the Google machine pulled it from, but
Yeah,
um
that's good information.
it is good. Let's go on to the next one, because I think that same type of question, but what happens when you're a business already in Utah and you're moving to a new state or a new location within Utah? So a little bit different. So a site selector's like, hey, I've got a company in St. George. I want to really move them to Logan. Then what happens?
Okay.
And I'm not good with dead space, so I'm going to talk a little bit through this. One of the reasons that we thought that it would be interesting to do this from this perspective is because I think we work really hard at what we do, and trying to build our businesses and trying to build, build upon the Wasatch Choice vision. And so we're trying to say, okay, how can we bring those two together, and what can we do to tell site selectors that we're doing this, and does that fit into what they're looking for? A few more seconds. Last few rankings. So let me go back to, whoops, where did it go? So wow, there we go. Competitive cost structure. Oh my goodness, I don't know. There we go.
There it is.
It's a New Deal. Infrastructure incentives still pretty high there. Access to markets, suppliers, quality of life has moved up or down, I guess, from the last one. And then the recognition and appreciation is the last one. Interestingly enough, when they're expanding within Utah, they really want this. To me, it's this this more of the relationship. So they want that responsive local leadership. How can I get my permitting in faster? They want that open and ongoing communication. Quality of life actually moves up considerably. So they already understand the quality of life. They know what it's like that they're here. They're just super, still wanting to have some of those incentives and programs. But I just kind of, it shifts the data around a little bit. So I thought that was interesting. So I thought about asking the question because, again, we work so hard on what are community provided amenities that businesses find important in attracting talent, or what. There's really no right answer here, but it's more about what do you think when businesses come in that what's important to them. That's great. Yeah.
Marcia, I'm thinking it depends a lot on the industry. Should we be thinking of like a type of industry, or should we be thinking of industries that attract skilled labor or anything like that?
I think in this answer, I'm just trying to say as a general business, what's really important. So if you're bringing in 100 people, doesn't matter what do they want to see? What do they, uh, where do they want to put their workforce? If they're expanding, great. If they're, or if they're coming in from out of state. So I don't think this one isn't reliant as much on industry. So housing continues to come up as a huge issue, and I think that's something that I'm glad we're talking about, because Laura Hans is going to talk about that in a little bit. Trails, high capacity transit, I like that. Culture, quality of life. Is Andrew just hitting the transit button?
I think Andrew's got transit all over that.
I would note that the answer that I gave was a broader answer about job site accessibility by various forms of transportation. Where we like to focus on transportation choices.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. We're just not going to do automobiles today. Good. I like it.
Shocking everybody, I didn't put housing first. I put transit first.
Oh, nice. Chris, all right. That's awesome.
Good for you, Chris.
Healthy chambers of commerce. And I think that's I don't know who said that, but as far as, we going back to that list, I mean, it seems like those that want to expand really want to have that relationship, and that, how do I continue to have that relationship with the place that I'm expanding to. So mentorship programs, that's a great program. Yeah. All right. Well, there's no right answer, but I think this is showing a lot about what Wasatch Front Regional Council is trying to do, what we're trying to do with Wasatch Choice Vision, trying to create cities, centers with a lot of this walkability, arts and culture, good education, recreation, parks, those kind of things. So that's right in line with a lot of what we're doing. All right, so the next question, I practiced. Can you tell that there's one, I practiced earlier. So what is the average annual return on investment for a company seeking to expand into Utah? So they're coming from outside, and I just thought that this is very interesting as well. This is another statistic that I thought was pretty interesting. So 1 is 0 to 10, 2 is 11 to 25%, 3 is 26 to 40, 4 is 41 to 60, and then 5 is 61 plus. And these are companies that are already here and they just want to expand. All right, and let me just show you the answer to this one. Oh, we'll keep going. Sorry, the answer is on the next one. So along those same lines, what is the average return on investment in years for a company seeking to expand in Utah? So they're already here, they just want to expand. And I thought a puppy picture would be helpful for you all today. Yeah. So somewhere in that 5 to 6 year range, okay? The answer is the average return of a company expanding in Utah is 15 to 30% annually. And it only takes them 1 to 2 years to get there.
Hmm.
So expansion's good, and Chris is my backup on this one, but I don't see him on yet. We talked through this phenomena of, you know, really trying to figure out how to see if we can expand companies because of this. So the same kind of question, what is it, a new company? So I've got somebody coming in from California, they want to come into Utah. You know, they've got 350, you know, people that want to come in. What's the average return on investment percentage for a company wanting to come in? Few more guesses? I should not give you a lot of time to Google, just so you know. or Chat GPT or whatever. So it looks like between 15 and 35%. Okay. How about years? What does it take? 1 to 2 years, 3 to 4 years, 5 to 6 years? So I'm going to move on. Sorry if you didn't get to vote. But interestingly enough, the annual return on investment for a new company outside the state coming into Utah, relocating, is actually lower. It's 12 to 25% annually. And it actually takes longer for them to have that rate of return or return on investment. So, you know, sometimes we really think that we can go out and benefit from trying to get all of these companies to come into to Utah, which is great. I think, you know, having new businesses here, but when companies want to expand in already here, it helps us with a lot of different things. You know, we don't have to maybe necessarily think about building new houses and new roads and all of the things that go along with when a new company comes in. And in reality, we have a better rate of return or return on investment when we expand versus relocating from another state. So I'm just going to ask, is Chris on? I'm going to ask. He doesn't look like it.
I don't see Chris on there. I don't see, was Chanel Davis County on there? She was, I thought she was at one time. I don't know if we have any. I know Sean Milne is on there. Sean, I'm sure will.
Sean, do you have any reaction to this, or Rochelle or Kirsten?
I stepped away and came back 2 seconds before you said my name, Gage. So I just got caught for being distracted in class.
Oh, wow, we got you.
Dang it. What was the data point?
So we have, you know, so any experience with, you know, we have expansion versus relocation. And I think it's interesting that the rate of return, or the rate, the ROI rate of investment or return on investment is actually higher for those that are expanding, and versus relocating. Do you have any experience with that? Or you know, I know you guys do a lot of expansion up there, so
Yeah, we've been pretty blessed with that. I mean, we've had a couple of I don't know that I'd call it relocation. I'd call it expansion, but for like the first time in Utah. So whether it's Fruit Lact, which is a Portuguese company that wanted to be close to some of our food processors, specifically because it's part of their, clientele base, or Utah Flour Mills, same thing. They give, since building, 60% of the flour they process goes straight across the property line from where they built to Pepperidge Farms, to make 5 million goldfish crackers an hour now. But like Pepperidge, Gosner, West Point Dairy, Sativa, Procter and Gamble, there's a lot of expansion going on, and like Post and Pepperidge have both said, among a few others, but just to name them, that these units here in northern Utah are their most profitable per capita out of the country. So, anecdotal as it may be, they may say that their rate of return, is better as expansion because they seem to already have a really great base with their current employees, and they're just looking to expand that, and their existing culture can absorb that to teach the new hires their culture, right? So I'm grasping at straws, and they've never really had that conversation with me to the level of detail that question just posed. But as we've talked about it, like, that's my best guess.
Yeah, that's, yeah. I had a bunch of goldfish today, so thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Rochelle or Kirsten, you guys are, I mean, Rochelle's got some expansion going out in Tooele County. Do you have any comments to that, or put you on the spot?
You're okay. It seems like, in my experience, the companies that are looking to expand already have an established customer base. And then the new one, and that would be why they'd hit their rate of investment earlier. The new ones coming in are still trying to get established. And I thoroughly agree with the 3 to 5 years. That's been what we've experienced with new ones. It takes a minimum of usually 3 years for them to start seeing the return on investment they're looking for.
Huh, interesting. Anybody else seeing that?
This is Greg with EDC Utah. I would just add that the majority of the projects that we see primarily are expansion projects. It's about a 60-40 split. So in expansion versus new companies moving to Utah. So it's nice to know, when we're talking about that rate of return and the companies that are choosing to stay in Utah, we're seeing a lot more projects that are expanding within Utah versus expanding into Utah. I would say one of our biggest opportunities, though, is companies that are coming in and ultimately buying some of these companies, or some through an acquisition, is how do we retain the longevity of the company remaining in Utah, and the sustainability of that company. I think that's where we kind of struggle historically, by and large, and that's why we don't have any Fortune 500 companies here.
So Greg, if I could just one of the things that a site selector said is that the relationship with the chambers and do you find that that's important to maybe help some of that retention?
Yeah, I think that the deeper the relationship with the community, and that's the community at large, that's a deepened relationship overall. And so that's the chamber, that's other organizations that they can get involved in, to where they really feel like they are a part of the community.
Fantastic. That's my guess. And just seeing if there's any. Now, Kirsten, just put you on the spot. Are you seeing that out in Salt Lake County?
I'm new enough here that I can't speak to the specifics of individual company expansions, but it makes a lot of sense to me. They're established in the market. They understand it. They're a known entity when it comes to hiring labor and workforce. They're not starting from scratch here. So I think It's interesting. I mean, we always like to see outside investment come in, right? Like, let's grow the pie, not reallocate the pie. But the support for the regional business economy is really critical for all of us as well.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, I think, thank you. I just wanted to give that perspective because I think it's sometimes interesting. You know, we get a lot of, companies coming in, and the economic developers are always trying to figure out the best way to sell our state or to sell a location, and just wanted you guys to have kind of a little bit of an insight to what they're dealing with as well. And both President Mortensen and President Bush they're on here, or Brush is on here, and thank you so much for keeping our workforce and quality of workforce going. So thank you. With that, I'll turn the time back over to you, Commissioner.
Thanks, Marcia. Great presentation. I would just say one thing when it comes to site selector. Chris Roybal, I think if he was on here, he would say the same thing. Is we hosted a conference for national, international site selectors here in Weber County, 3 or 4 months ago. And really the word that came out, actually it was one of their key executives from Boston, stood up and made a comment about Utah site selectors and what we do here. The end result is from her comments were that really the information should come from the local entity they're dealing with, and that our state partners should be aware that whatever city or county should be the communication outlet for that communication. They know the zoning, they know the infrastructure, they know what's available. I know some site selectors were critical that they were told one thing by a state organization or another organization. When they got down to boots on the ground, they found out that wasn't necessarily true. So I would just say, look, let's all work together. But at the end of the game, our local, our city and county site selectors are the ones that have the information. They're the ones that understand what actually exists out there. And we love our state partners. We love our national partners that bring people to us. But at the end of the day, if they're trying to sell something that we can't provide, all that does is frustrate site selectors, and they go away. So we just want to make sure they get true and accurate information from the proper source. So I think Chris would second that if he was here. That's what we found out from that conference. So anyway, thanks, Marcia. Anything else? Any other comments? Let's move on then. We have a person with us not new to this committee. We're happy to have Laura Hanson with us this afternoon. Laura is Senior Advisor for Long Range Planning for the Utah Governor's Office, State Housing Plan. I think they call it Built Here. Laura's been with us. She served a number of other jobs. She's been Senior Advisor for Long Range Planning for the Utah Governor's Office. She has several roles throughout the career, including consulting, executive director, director of planning for UTA, and with the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget. So she has some great experience. Current job is important for really the ongoing health of our state and economic growth. We're happy to hear about this new initiative that is called Built Here. And Laura, appreciate you being with us. Time's yours.
Thank you so much. I am happy to be here, and it's been a little while since I've attended this committee, and so it's nice to see you all again. And I missed the memo that it was a virtual meeting, so here I am in the conference room, but that's great. Built Here, as the governor was preparing for a second term, he wanted to put together a strategic plan that essentially laid out some ambitious goals for what he wanted to have his administration accomplish in the next 4 years. And so we put together a document called Built Here. And if you go to the governor's website, I'll drop the link in the chat here. But if you go to his website, you can access along the top, there's some initiatives. In fact, there's initiatives. And then if you drop down on initiatives, you'll see second term initiatives. And that's where you can find the Built Here document itself. It's organized around 3 primary categories: people, place, and prosperity. And within each of those, there is an objective And then there's a performance metric or some sort of leading metric. We recognize this isn't the only thing that matters for each of these objectives, but it's one thing that we can track and count as an administration to make sure that we're moving towards that. And Rosie's already on the link. She's amazing. Thank you, Rosie. So you can look into that. Metrics that are of interest to this group are the whole prosperity section is really about how our communities are doing economically, and we have good healthcare and good educational opportunities. There is a metric in there about supporting rural Utah with a transformative infrastructure project for each region, and so that's something for those of you that are in rural parts of the state of the WFRC area that may be of interest to you. There are also a couple of metrics in the place section that are about housing and center-based development, and we're really trying to embrace that concept. And so I won't go into any more detail on Built here, but you can look at it. We are building a dashboard, a public-facing dashboard that will be available also on the governor's website, so you can see how the state is doing as we progress towards these goals. And then Marcia asked me to spend a little bit more time talking about another project that we are working on, which is a housing strategic plan for the state. And I do have a few slides that I will go through on that. And I know we have limited time, so I won't spend too much time on them. I'll go through them quickly, but you can always reach out to me anytime if you'd like more information about this process and how it's going. But I just wanted to give you a quick flyby of what we're trying to accomplish. So the housing strategic plan, what are we trying to do with this? Obviously, housing is one of those topics where there's no silver bullet and there is no single stakeholder that has all of the keys to success. It takes local governments, it takes the state, it takes private developers, it takes the financing and banking industry, it takes the insurance agencies. There's a whole variety of stakeholders engaged. And so what we wanted to do is to really be intentional in bringing all these various different stakeholders together and having a collaborative process where we say, okay, we all have different roles here. How can we work together to tackle this really sticky problem? And so the plan that we are working is intended to be very action oriented. It is not a research project. It's not just, going on about the problems that we have. We all know that already. We're feeling that already. We have lots of kids living in adult children living in our basements that we would like to have the opportunity to have a home someday.
I have an adult child living in my basement, just for the record.
Yes, Andrew's not the only one. So we wanted it to be really action oriented. And so the plan, when we're completed with it, will have some really clear steps that each stakeholder can take to help move things forward in a productive way. Another thing that we wanted to accomplish was to have this plan really serve as a centering document or a foundational piece to guide future housing policy discussions. It feels like in the housing space, there's a lot of great ideas and activity happening in lots of different avenues and categories and spaces. And we wanted to have a place where everyone could come together and say, okay, this represents our collective best effort and our collective articulation of what our goals are, so that as the legislature is thinking about future policy, as city councils or county commissioners are thinking about future policy for their communities, we can go back to this one place to say, okay, well, this is what we said our goals were. How are the policies that we're talking about now aligning with or misaligning with the ideas in this housing plan? We have also talked about this plan, and I know this will all get cheers, replacing the existing moderate income housing plan and reporting requirements. We don't know, in full disclosure, what that is going to look like yet. We know that the moderate income housing plan is not everyone's favorite thing, and that it may not always be getting us the kind of data that we are looking for. So we are thinking carefully about how this process could replace that in a more meaningful way.
Laura, can I
more
just
detail to come.
Just an interjection? There are some people in this meeting. I'm sitting across the table from Laura. That's why I'm looking up at her. There are some people in this meeting who are intimately familiar with the moderate income housing plan requirements because they represent cities. And so you all know, but for the benefit of some of our private sector folks who may not actually know, the moderate income housing plan structure was put into place by the legislature several years ago. It was thoroughly negotiated between cities and developers and other legislators, of course, and other stakeholders, with the idea that cities would come up with strategies from a list that was listed in the statute of housing policies they would pursue, and then they would do regular reporting in to the state with their progress. I think it was very well intentioned. It has perhaps not achieved has been as effective as we had all sort of hoped it would be, and it has felt to some extent an administrative burden. So the balance of administrative burden and effectiveness has not been as effective as we wanted it to be, which, Laura, I think is the reason that all of us together are looking now after a few years, how can we refresh this to be, have the best balance between effectiveness and minimizing administrative burden?
Thank you for that important clarification. And yeah, I'm sorry to skip over that for those of you who may not be intimately familiar with it. So thanks so much, Andrew. That's great. Okay, let's see if I can advance my slides here. Oh my goodness, it's not working. Okay, so about the plan, I already mentioned it outlines an actionable work plan that we are focusing on lots of target audiences. I won't go into too much detail on that, but it's supposed to be the plan for everyone that represents everyone. We have had a highly collaborative process, and we've engaged at least 100 people. I would not be surprised if it's a little bit over that, through various working groups and different folks representing a whole spectrum of different kinds of stakeholders. We have broken the development of the plan up into 2 phases. The first phase started in September 2024, so last fall. We produced a draft plan in January and had that out there in the wild for public comment and review throughout the legislative session. We're not calling it final because it won't be final until the very end. But that plan has been published and is available online. And I will drop the link to that in the chat as well. Phase 2 is what we are undertaking right now. We started in April of 25, so we took a small break after the end of the legislative session, but no rest for the weary, and just dove right back into it. We do have a couple of statutory deadlines that exist now as a result of this last legislative session. We do need to provide a written progress report to the Political Subdivisions Interim Committee in October, and we need to deliver a final plan in December of 2025, and we are on track to meet that deadline. So just one thing we wanted to start with was just defining success. What does success look like in meeting our housing goals? And we came up with a vision statement that every resident in Utah has access to safe, affordable, and stable housing options, and the access to opportunities and a high quality of life. And we make the commitment to working together across sectors to make that happen. And back to the Built Here goal, here are some specific metrics and targets that the governor has outlined in the Built Here document, which is to deliver to market at least 150,000 new housing units by the end of his second term. That includes 35,000 new starter homes and 40,000 new homes that are in identified regional centers, such as the Wasatch Choice vision. So, and we are starting some conversations with the rural parts of the state to see what sort of centers might exist in Richfield, for example, or Price or Vernal, and see how that might expand across the state.
May I offer an interjection here, Laura? So on these goals, you see the numbers, and I think it's really worth emphasizing that the goal is to deliver to market, meaning the houses are actually occupiable by real people. And there's large numbers there, and there's a difference between planning at the local level, regional and local level, planning and zoning for housing to be constructed, of course, and that which is largely something that is done by the public sector. And then actually the building of the homes, which obviously is something done principally by the private sector. And so we all have a role to play in this, going back to Laura's point that all these stakeholders, many of you in the public and private sector are involved in this work. I'll just note on that number of 40,000 new homes in identified regional centers, Laura mentioned the Wasatch Choice Vision. That's a lot of the strategy that we work on here at WFRC with our partners. These areas like around transit stations, for example, where more housing units could be created because it's a really efficient way to absorb growth. And I'll note and remind all of you, we've talked about this to some extent before, there's a requirement in state law that every city that has a transit station, so think a rail or bus rapid front runner, tracks, bus rapid transit station, has to develop a station area plan around that transit station. And those plans have to be certified by the Metropolitan Planning Organizations, WFRC or MAG. Well, so far, we've certified 43 station area plans around the whole region. There's at least that number that are still being worked on right now. And as of now, just from that 43 stations that have been certified, there are plans to build an additional 48,000 new housing units around those stations that do not exist today. So I note that because it's really significant progress from a planning perspective. And then getting them actually funded, financed, funded, and built is the next step in the process, which again comes back to public and private sector working together. But really good progress, I think, in meeting that slice of the demand for out of the overall and larger housing need.
Yes, love that. Thank you for that addition. Okay, so we have 3 goals in the housing plan. We wanted to make sure that we were being really holistic in our thinking and comprehensive in this. So the first goal is really about the houses themselves, housing availability, affordability, and stability. That includes tenant protections and housing for the lowest of income community members. Goal 2 was to foster community well-being and quality of life. This is not just about housing, but it's about the kind of communities that we want to live in and the kind of communities we want to create. And then the third piece is really about how we do the work. And we made a goal of seeking consensus and evidence-based policy and housing support solutions. So it is not based on anecdotes. We're looking at actual data. And we are not advancing things through this particular process where we do not feel like we have at least a basic level of consensus and willingness to explore a topic further. That doesn't mean that everybody loves everything that we will be advancing, but we are getting to a point, or we are setting a threshold of, yeah, I can live with it. And we know that there's more conversation to happen, and we'll work out the details there. The reason for that really is a lot of states that we see around the country who are doing really bold things on housing, and they get a lot of press attention, and it's exciting in some cases and frustrating for other stakeholders, but many of those are tied up in litigation, and we don't want our need is too urgent, and we need to make action now. We don't have time to waste in lawsuits. We also set a series of guiding principles. I will not read these all in detail, but you'll notice the first, as those of you who represent local governments prioritize collaboration over preemption. That does not mean that we won't support something that is a preemption of some local controls, but our first goal, our first step, and our second step is going to see if we can find collaborative solutions first. Think holistically, collaborate across sectors, maintain a long-range vision. This is not just about today or tomorrow. This is about the kind of community that we want to live in long-term. We recognize there's really complex market forces. We can't control all of that. And rural Utah is different than the urbanized Wasatch Front, and we can't do a one-size-fits-all solution. So phase 1, here's a QR code that will take you to the document that we have published already. Phase 1 focused on establishing those goals and those guiding principles. We created a framework for how we're going to go about tracking all of this, and we did a huge inventory of the available data that's out there, all the various housing support structures. So those are organizations, boards, funding programs, legislative tools, a whole bunch of things. And then we came up with a list of 200 plus possible implementation tactics. Phase 2, which we're working on right now, in part will respond to a legislative audit on housing and show how the plan is responding to that. But then it will have some recommendations on metrics. I mentioned we wanted this to be evidence-based. What data points do we want to collect? Who's responsible for that collection and reporting? How do we want to maybe align, refocus, consolidate, streamline our housing structures and programs? Which tactics do we want to advance as priorities? And how are we going to go about maintaining this long term? And I will speed up here just a little bit. We have 5 working groups that we're working on in this second phase. They are structured around kind of AMI targets, but then also we have kind of a rural focused one, and then we have one that's focused on infrastructure and kind of community connection. And we have a handful of metrics. I mentioned that these are just some examples of some of the metrics that we are using. Some of these we have data for right now. Some of them we're not quite sure how to capture. There are several more than what's displayed on the screen, just to give you a sampling though. And we've created a housing dashboard that is available right now, actually online. Again, not all of the data exists, but you can toggle along the left side of the screen to see different metrics. You can click on county, your specific county or where you live, or you can see statewide numbers, why it's important, and then what the data source is for those. And then the final kind of deliverable will advance a series of tactics that will be formatted in some way that kind of looks like this. There will be 4 different kinds of tactics. They are either policy changes, they're strategic investments, things we could put money towards, they're outreach or education initiatives, or their data and transparency efforts. And each tactic that we advance has to pass a 4-part test. It has to have medium to high impact, so it's actually going to move the needle in some way. It has realistic implementation feasibility. It aligns with our goals and principles, and there's general level of consensus to explore it further. Again, that doesn't mean everybody loves it, but we can live with it, and we're happy to talk more. A couple examples of some of the tactics, allow multifamily housing in more districts, revise building codes to eliminate unnecessary barriers. A single stair has been brought up there, pre-approved ADU designs, planning for growth at a high level statewide, real estate transfer tax on high value homes, capping the maximum home size relative to the lot size. There you can see that there's a whole variety of things here. I hope that there's something on this list that you love. I also hope there's something on this list that causes a small heart attack, because our goal is to throw them all out there and to figure out where we can come together and what we think is gonna make a difference. So these are not things, what's on the screen is not necessarily what will be in the final plan. And with that, that's my last slide. Here's my contact info. I am also working very closely with the Governor's Advisor for Housing Strategy and Innovation, Steve Waldrop. Many of you know him, I'm sure. Feel free to reach out to us anytime. We'd love to hear your thoughts and incorporate your ideas. So thank you so much.
Laura, thank you very much. Anyone have questions for Laura? That was a great slide presentation, great information. Any questions from members of the committee?
I might ask, Chris put you on this spot, Chris Sloan. Is that something that you've got that real estate background as well? So does this sound like something the real estate industry would get behind?
Without being the one that speaks for the Utah Association of Realtors anymore, although I am on their board of directors, and our name was on that list of stakeholders, and we are very, very involved in this. We've discussed many of the things that are already there internally, and spend a fair amount of time working on the legislative solutions. And then with my local planning and zoning hat on, I see some issues that municipalities have. As Linda said, there's no silver bullet here. There's a group of about 6 different types of stakeholders that all have to get on the same page, and to this point they haven't been. And I hope that this is a good way to get us going forward towards singing from the same sheet of music, because to this point we're not. and none of this gets solved without those other pieces.
Yeah. And Commissioner Farrar, I know you've spent a lot of time in West Weber and putting 5 million houses up out there, but okay, maybe not 5 million, but
Not quite that many. No, so, and I think Laura was exactly right. I looked at those strategies. Some I really like, some I wasn't that quite excited about, but what it takes in order to solve this issue is to get everybody at the same table. And then, and obviously I've talked to a number of our legislators, and I've in the past, the legislators haven't been very excited about dictating or legislating housing to local communities, counties, but I've expressed to both House and Senate leadership is that I think that if we're going to solve this problem, it's going to take action by the legislature. It's just very difficult at the local level, Laura, as you well know, especially with some of the local entities that we have that are opposed to growth. And unfortunately, you can be opposed to growth, but it's coming. And with these strategies, if we get around it and embrace it, we can come up with logical and efficient ways to provide housing that's going to come, or we can let it come and dictate itself. So I think you're headed the right direction. Steve's a good friend of mine. He actually took my spot in the legislature, so I know he understands housing very well. So I'm excited to see this, and I'm hoping I know the other counties across the Wasatch Front should embrace this, because we all have to join together to solve this issue. So thank you very much for your efforts on this, Laura.
Yeah, thank you for the comments.
And the governor. Yeah, give him my best.
Commissioner, I might note, just to emphasize a point that Laura made, that in the development of this state housing plan, there has been a lot of engagement from a lot of stakeholders, including county and city government officials who are working on this at, literally across the table from the private sector stakeholders, as Chris was noting. And I see several local elected officials on with us, Mayors Mon and Bush and Lang, and I just want to give them an opening, if the boots on the ground at the local level, see if they wanted to ask any questions or offer any quick comments here. Mayor Mon, you're dropping info in the chat. You want to speak up?
Yeah, I would. So I'd just like to see if there's a way that we can engage cities more who have been a big part of the effort to understand the impacts and kind of some of the side effects. Maybe we can correct some of those. Maybe we can embrace those. I gave a presentation 2 days ago to another WFRC meeting on transportation that kind of really laid out a lot of the impacts that my particular city has. But I got several texts after that presentation, and I got a lot of that was based on impact that I got from the League of Cities conference in April, talking about these issues. So we have some common side effects that I think can be mitigated, but I would just like to see if there's a way we can engage cities more in the conversation, and not ignore the local level understanding of how this comes into play.
You bet. I would be more than happy to visit with you offline further and talk more. But we do have the League of Cities and Towns and the Utah Association of Counties on our committees, and then we have several folks representing individual communities on both the steering committee and technical committee and working groups. So we're trying our very best to include all voices, but I'd love to talk more about your specific experiences and observations and see what we can do.
Great, thank you.
You bet.
And I would just say this, I agree 100% with what the mayor just said, is that this needs to be solved if we're going to solve it at the local level. Obviously I said we need some direction from the state, but the state has to engage the local leaders, and it has to be their idea. They have to, again, I don't think it should be a top down, but if we get the local municipalities engaged and understand that this is something that's in their best interest, really follows that Wasatch Choice vision that Andrew's put together, I think makes sense for all of us. So anyway, thank you very much for that. Anyone else? Laura, thank you again for being with us this afternoon.
You bet. Thank you for the opportunity.
We always appreciate you. Okay, anything else? If not, we're going to move on. Andrew, did you have anything else to add?
No, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on then. Thanks very much for that presentation. We're very fortunate to have with us Michael Moore. He's the Director of Staff for the 75th Air Base Wing Economic Impact at Hill Air Force Base. Very fortunate. Michael Moore actually reports to our WACOG, and I think he also is Davis County on a monthly basis. So we've had some of this information, but it may come as very valuable information to other members of this committee. He spent several years at Hill Air Force Base and understands the 75th Air Base Wing and the collaboration that needs to happen along the Wasatch Front and really what happens behind the gates in order to create a smooth operation. We know that the impact that Hill Air Force Base has within a couple of our cities in Weber County and Davis County really benefits this entire state from an economic, and I'm going to say enormous economic impact. So I'm going to turn the time over to Michael. He's going to really tell us it's really a city within a city out there, a large city that benefits the entire economic development along the Wasatch Front and the state of Utah. Michael, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Commissioner, and I appreciate the kind introduction there. This is and has been always a great forum to exchange communication or great information, and especially the stuff that we had today on housing is of critical interest to us. So thank you to you, Commissioner, for inviting us to have a little bit of time to present what we do to here at Hill Air Force Base. And, I thank the attention of all of our mayors and the committee members. So with that, let me jump right in here as the representative to the unelected mayor of Hill Air Force Base, and that is Colonel Ian Cornelius. And we are very fortunate to participate in both of the COGs, whether it's the WACOG or the Davis COG, as well as with the different military affairs committee, the whole way down to Salt Lake, up here to Tumac. So with that, we've got a presentation for you that will hopefully give you a good sense for the breadth of the impact of Hill Air Force Base, and also give you a sense for the missions that we do support here. I think a lot of you will probably find that surprising. Marcia has got the slides; they're freely available to post. So I'm going to cover some of them, at the top level, but we've included some detail so that folks can take this and have that information readily available. But please, at any time, raise your hand or just jump in. I may not see you raise your hand with the presentation on the screen with any questions. So with that, we'll jump over here to sharing the screen. And can everybody see the presentation?
Yep, we can.
Outstanding. All right. So welcome to learning about Team Hill. We have got an unprecedented view here of our Wasatch Front. It is a phenomenal place to work and truly a privilege to be here. So here's what I'm going to cover today. Just these 4 different areas. And I'm going to focus on one of the things that may be of interest to everybody, and that is our enhanced use lease strategy on how we deal with our aging infrastructure. But first, let's talk about Team Hill. I've got 2 slides here that really are shock and awe slides. We connect with all of our different mission partners and all of the 89 units that are assigned to Hill Air Force Base to a variety of national level centers and commands here within the United States Air Force. And so at the top, you've got the Secretariat, and below that, you've got the major air commands. And you see 4 different major air commands represented here, where we've got direct reporting to some of them, to Air Force Materiel Command, Air Combat Command, the Reserves, and Air Education and Training Command. And I'm happy to talk about any of those at any length anybody would like. But we also directly connect with some of the major defense agencies out around here, whether it's Defense Logistics Agency, Defense Information Systems Agency, which is basically handling all of our communications across the world for the Department of Defense, and soon to be Defense Health Agency as well. Moving on to additional squadrons out there and units with the Team Hill snapshot, I think this gives you a pretty detailed sense of the breadth and depth of what we host here at Hill Air Force Base. Now, those are kind of the what's in the boxes on there that talk about the organizational relationship that really go to illustrate, how far and how deeply we connect across the Air Force as well as up to a national headquarters. But this slide breaks down all of the workforce that we've got out here for our civilian workforce, and pretty much the areas of specialty that they work in, the whole way from our logistics side of the world. We do host one of the Air Force's 3 premier logistics complexes. So you can think of industrial complex that way, where we are focused on doing the mod repair and overhaul of America's fighter fleet, as well as a huge variety of other specialty tasks, and work in the end-to-end sustainment and modernization for America's intercontinental ballistic missile fleet. The arrows that you see on here on the slides represent a change from the last time. This is from 2025, and we have briefed this in 2022 and 2023. And so from our last update in 2023, if you see an arrow on here, that represents an increase or a decrease in at least 10% of the numbers that you see here. So kind of gives you a little sense of the movement. I expect that after everything settles out from this year, with the new administration reshaping the Department of Defense and subsequently the Department of the Air Force, and as you see from all of our other mission partners out here, we will update those numbers after this fiscal year and probably into the next calendar year as things settle out. So this should give you a good sense for what is here in terms of skill sets at Hill Air Force Base. Now, what I learned in marketing and business development, whenever I went to Booz Allen right after I retired from the military and did that for a couple of years, is understand your audience. And these next couple of slides help you really understand the audience that we have here at Hill Air Force Base. Between our civilian population, which stands at about 14,000, and our military population, which is a little north of 5,000, you can see that we've got every age demographic pretty well covered. For the civilians age 40 and above, we've got about 65%. And then in the military, if you look at age 40 and below, that hits it just comes in at just 90%. And so here at Hill Air Force Base, we span all of the generations there. The interesting one that got my attention is on the military side, where you see 61 and over. I do not know the name of that reservist, but I suspect it's somebody from our Air Force Reserves that has been serving for a very long time. But that's about 1 or 2 people out there. And, this gives you a sense for our demographics with respect to age. Now, when it comes to education, we also, span the full gamut from high school to graduate work, and you can see how this breaks out. Especially in our civilian side of things, with the number of doctorates that we have out here. So 3% of 14,000 is a pretty sizable number, and you can see where we hit on that educational scale and how we take advantage of certainly education in the military, where we've got a lot of people who transition through who are constantly working on their bachelor's and or master's degrees, and from our civilian population, coming in with a high school education and then working on the trades mainly in our logistics areas. So that is a little bit of who we are out here at Hill Air Force Base. Now let's talk about Team Hill overall. And Team Hill is all about air power. We are the second largest installation in the United States Air Force. The one who is the number one is Eglin Air Force Base. And I contend and have contended for a long time that Eglin Air Force Base cheats, because they count their over water ranges. We actually managed to land out here in Hill Air Force with Hill Air Force Base with our installation commander, Colonel Dan Cornelius, as that unelected mayor of the base, but is responsible for all of this land and the management and the stewardship that goes along with it, to include the nearly 1 million acres out in the Utah Test and Training Range. A very huge challenge, and you can see the overview with the map, but I want to call everybody's attention to the upper left-hand side there. What looks kind of like a kind of a bunch of Legos or Duplo blocks kind of put together is a visual depiction of the airspace over the Utah Test and Training Range. It is a military operating area, which means we exclude commercial air traffic from that, so that not just our fighter forces, but we have a lot of test activities that go on out there. And this visual represents where those air corridors sit and how much they are blocked up to 60,000 feet above sea level. And so, why do we need all that airspace? Well, we also do a lot of test out here because the Utah Test and Training Range is a test and a training range, and we are the only secure site where our enemies cannot see the new weapons that we are testing. And for some of the weapons that we test, we do expect them to fly a very long way, possibly halfway around the world. This is the only uninterrupted place that we can safely employ those weapons, make sure they're going to do what they're intended to do. And so that's why we have all the airspace that we have. Overall, though, in terms of an industrial plan, about 1,700 facilities. We recently went over 30,000 personnel assigned to or supporting the base or actually living here. And, we've got 19,000 square nautical miles of airspace overall, as you see represented there. So with that, we talked about economic impact, and the commissioner highlighted that we do show a very large economic impact. And this measures our primary and secondary impact in the local area. The Utah Defense Alliance actually calculated a level of impact that continues to cascade throughout the state. If you go out to their website, you'll be able to see that. But for us, as we measure it within the Department of the Air Force, we calculated for 2024, which is a backward-looking metric, a $12.7 billion primary and secondary impact to the Utah economy. You can see how we have been ramping up very quickly over the last few years, and a lot of that comes down to the investment with the military construction going on and the expansion and modernization of our intercontinental ballistic missile fleet sustainment piece. We host the Nuke Weapons Center here, and we were chosen a number of years ago to design, build, and field the Sentinel, which replaces the Minuteman III weapon system. And so with that, you can see that our military construction budget is running at about $1.8 billion. Last year it was 2.2, because we are working to burn that down to get all of the buildings built. We did have a forecast of about 1,900 jobs that we expected to create over the next 5 years. We will refine that adjustment based on what the Department of Defense is doing and how they are going to realign their priorities for the FY26 budget. That's currently in negotiation. Nothing has been passed into law. In fact, we do not have a fiscal year 25 budget. So a lot of these numbers are subject to change, and we will keep you updated throughout all of the community touch points that we have as that does change. But we live in your area, whether we're military or civilian. We have about 21,000 local residents here at Hill Air Force Base. Here's a breakdown of the housing statistics per city. This is a little bit old, so we are going to go through and update that again after everything settles out. But this will still give you a pretty good snapshot because that does focus a lot on the civilians that we've got out here. And bear in mind, we've got about 5,000 dependents that live on base, so those numbers go up. This is all outside. So when we look at the 75th Air Base Wing, let's talk about the different units. And we, as the host for the Air Base Wing, this is primarily a kind of a leave behind slide. But we've talked about the host wing for the base and the installation commander responsible for everything, and already highlighted the size of the base and the number of mission partners out here. So although we say we have 56 mission partners, at our last count, we have 89 different units. And so like the 388 Fighter Wing, which we'll talk about in a minute, they've got multiple units underneath them. We group them together as a mission partner. As General Bell, our current Air Logistics Complex commander, likes to say, we are the fighter and the ICBM depot. Hill Air Force Base got designated as a fighter depot back in 2000s. And with all of the growth here on the intercontinental ballistic missile side of things, we are also the ICBM depot because nobody else does what we do here. We host 2 fighter wings. We have the first combat fighter wing and the largest combat fighter wing of F-35s in the world, over 1 million acres, as we talked about, the facilities, and the over 30,000 team members on base. In our wing, we support all of that with 3 groups of director, the wing staff, and we cover the gamut to make sure that all of our mission partners, a couple of which I'll highlight here, remain successful in accomplishing their mission. We talked about the Ogden Air Logistics Complex a little bit. Here is a laundry list of the fighter and the tactical aircraft, the C-130 Hercules, that we support here. In addition to the Minuteman III, that is an intercontinental ballistic missile system, and they also now work in partnership with the software engineer group, because software engineering group is split off as part of the directorate. But right now, as of today, the Ogden Air Logistics Complex is still working through that reverse for merger and acquisitions. They are splitting off, but they are still supporting them financially and materially with a lot of their staff support. In terms of total force integration, the 388th and the 419th Fighter Wing work together in a total force integration relationship, and that the 388th maintains all of the F-35s on a day-to-day basis, but they are integrated and supplemented with the 419th. And so the 419th uses those F-35s, of which we have 78 assigned to Hill Air Force Base, to train their pilots. If you look at pilot training and making sure that we can resource train and equip them ultimately as a combat mission ready pilot, it takes longer to build that combat mission ready pilot than it does to actually build an F-35. And so that is the pacing investment that we make. But here at Hill Air Force Base, we train 4 fighter squadrons worth of deployable capability with 3 fighter squadrons worth of airplanes, really saving the taxpayer quite a bit of money when you look at how much it takes to sustain and operate the F-35. But the capability it brings is unmatched in the world. And as you can see from this slide, our commanders locally fly and support 7 areas of responsibility all throughout the world, and all of the combat commanders. Moving on from the fighter side to the Nuke Weapon Center side, we support 2 ICBM systems here. First, Minuteman III is currently deployed. We have got 400 combat-capable nuclear missiles on status 24/7, 365, and we also do all of the backshop sustainment for all of their different parts, everything but the glow, I like to say. The Department of Energy takes care of that special package that rides on an intercontinental ballistic missile, but we here at Hill Air Force Base, all across the base, take care of the rest of it to make sure that it is always combat ready. And then Sentinel, as I talked about, that represents the next system that is currently under design, working on the deployment and the logistics support capability. In about 30 years, the Minuteman III will come completely off status and be fully replaced by the Sentinel. And so out here, just like any Air Force base, we've got a lot of challenges. I'm going to spend some time focusing on how we are going to get after our aging infrastructure, and then just touch very quickly on the last 2 things because I want to leave some time for questions. And so we here at Hill Air Force Base run the Department of Defense's largest enhanced use lease project. We've got an explainer here for what is an enhanced use lease, but basically what it comes down to is, back in BRAC 95, the federal government, the Department of Defense realized that, hey, look, we've got a lot of space out there and we need a lot of space. In our case, we are an arsenal. We started as an arsenal. We remain an arsenal today with over 0.5% of the Air Force's total stockpile. But all of that land, we are never going to be able to develop, but we do need it for standoff and security capabilities. And so from that, Congress passed some laws that allowed for enhanced use lease to let us enter into a long-term agreement with a partner, an SRDP, Sunset Ridge Development Partnership, are our partners in a 50-year lease to take that land, utilize it for the benefit for everybody. We get a part of the proceeds that come off of that, but the developer gets a chance to work either within the base, or we actually move the fence line to be able to support what they want to do in terms of making money and helping out the entire community building capability. So the why, it was underutilized, we could get better use out of it and benefit back to back to the government as well as to the local community. Our project is called the Falcon Hill Project. Here's the 50-year background. It covers some of the things that I already talked about. In the lower right, you can see what we have designated in terms of the first installment of the 550 total acres. We recently got authorization to extend this lease out into the Utah Test and Training Range, as well as the Little Mountain Test Facility, which we also own, but a contractor operates for us. So we're going to adjust this based on the 1800 North interchange that's happening, but we have got the capability to expand that right now. There are a lot of things that we've got in enhanced use lease that have already been built from all of those things that you see on line 3, and we focus all of our build out based on the leasing market and all the economic assessments that get done. But we have got the potential right now for another 6 million square feet total of new commercial facilities as we get into continuing to make some areas available, which I'll hit here in just a second after we cover some of the successes. And so you've got these slides. I'm not going to go into these in detail, but basically we can do building through our enhanced use lease at 20 to 30 to sometimes up to 40% faster than a military construction project, and certainly significantly less expensive. And all of that, all those profits go back in locally because we are partnered with a local consortium. So that gives you a couple of examples. We have many more, but those are great in the past. What's going on looking forward? For those of you who are involved with the Military Installation Development Authority, or MIDA, that is the glue and the secret sauce that actually makes this whole enhanced use lease possible. And not only possible, but also successful. Various states throughout the nation have heard of what we do here. They come in, they ask how to make this happen. And we say, go get yourself a MIDA. You got to work with the state. And the most active thing going on right now, I can look to my left and I see the construction going on for what I highlighted here, and that's the 1800 North interchange, where the state has partnered with us in a great project to bring another gate onto the base, as well as working with the community to help solve some of the congestion that has grown up over the years as Hill Air Force Base has continued to grow, as well as the outside community. You can see a lot of the different various aspects of the project itself. What do we have currently in development right now? What we've already constructed, how much benefit that the Air Force has received, and a vast majority of the $80 million has actually come from the state. Once they look at the beneficial, investment, we talked about return on investment out there. The state helped us build a highly secure software facility to where we would bring in another 300 to 400 software engineers. We are almost to hitting that goal. We have over 350 software engineers that work in that facility that do projects that can only be done in that facility, purposely built for the highly secure nature for what they do. You can see a lot of the other things that we've done, but looking forward, we have got a couple of office buildings that are in development and in design right now. And we're also looking at possibly partnering to do a smaller apartment complex right out of the gate, right outside the gate, to be able to house our airmen. And so between that, but a lot of other things going on, but the 1800 gate is one of the key projects that is underway right now. And so, here is our master plan to help take care of our aging infrastructure. We have got what I call Gen Zero Air Force buildings, because they were built when the Army Air Corps was here. And so the Army Air Corps was actually part of the Army before it split off in 1947 to become the Air Force. And we have got those buildings out here that were part of the original Ogden Arsenal. In fact, we've got some of the buildings out here where the D-Day planners came in to do all of the measurements for the munitions that were being packed and assembled out here, to figure out what they needed and how they load them out for the D-Day invasion. So those resources that we have continued to have limp along. Today, we are asking 5th gen airmen to live in Gen Zero kind of buildings. And so we want to be able to modernize that. The payment in kind that we're getting off of the enhanced use lease is allowing us to build administrative space, which right now ranks like this high for the in the United States Air Force because of the growth of the missions that we have. Replacing administrative space will never get funded. This is the only way we're going to be able to do that. When you look at the building specifications for what we're trying to build on base, we believe pretty well on our way to starting to break ground after we get the design finish for our first building. And I'll show you what that campus looks like, but that first building will house all of the buildings, kind of highlighted in red toward the bottom, and we'll take all the people out of there, and that will, expand that area to be able to turn over to the lease developer, SRDP, to turn that into commercial retail space. And we've already got funding to demolish those 4 buildings that are already highlighted. The one in black there, 1219, has already been demolished. So that will open that area up. And that's the Air Force's responsibility to get rid of those. But this gives you a pretty good overview of the phases that we're going to work from south to north to basically burn the ships. Once we move out, we are not letting anybody else move in. Where will they move to? Well, this is the overview of the area that they're going to move into. And what you see on the right-hand side, those 4 buildings we call the quad, those are all enhanced use lease facilities that house contractors that largely and directly support the Sentinel weapon system or the Minuteman III weapon system. And so all but 1 floor of those are commercially leased out, but they're also inside the gate so that those partners, those business partners that are needed to support the weapons system, can work very closely in a collaborative fashion with our military and government partners. And so where we're going to relocate the 1,200 areas is ideally in those 3 buildings that we have got cited, and that's where we're going to put them. And so, here's we call the first one building 1573. Out here we have numbers on all of our buildings, so that is the number that we've already reserved for this new and first pick building, and it will be the first one in the Air Force built with all payment in kind funds that are generated from an enhanced use lease project. So we do a lot of firsts out here, and I thought that this was one of those stories that this council would be interested in. How is the government trying to help themselves outside of the normal government process? And so, like I said, we've got some things slated for 2025 so that we can start that design contract. We've got a couple more signatures that we need. We've already incorporated the changes from MITA so we can get that moving forward. So, here are the things that we've got to do. We always have to take into account those market driven economics, and inflation has been killing us. What we started out with plans for a 3-story building is now probably going to end up as a 2-story building just based on what we can afford, because we do buy what we can afford. Overcoming some of the frequent leadership and the personnel turnover is always a challenge as well, because for the military command cycle of every 2 years, we constantly need to make sure that our advocacy comes off with a very, very strong message as to why we need to continue these projects. But we also have to manage expectations very clearly because of those economic factors that come in, and everything that happens in the economy directly affects us. But we still enjoy a lot of support for all the Falcon Hill efforts, as well as all the players that are in there. Here's another thing I just wanted to highlight for everybody's awareness. We actually run dormitories on base for our first term airmen. We've got 444 rooms. We've got about 400 airmen in there at any given time. But this infrastructure was built in the 80s or before, and that was actually a long time ago. I hate to say it, I went to college in the 80s, and now that's 40 years ago, I was a sophomore in college, and I like to think that I'm aging a little better than the buildings are, but hey, I leave that up to my wife to make that assessment. But we're able to do some of those things with those replacements with our enhanced use lease. This we have to compete in the Air Force MILCON side of things. And so that kind of gives you a little bit of a sense of our aging infrastructure. In terms of our workforce, we're going through a huge restructure with the workforce and the workload. You've seen what what the media has laid out there. They do a fairly good job, and they do ask us what the impacts are. And so what you're reading, if you're seeing statements from from Colonel Cornelius or some of the other officials on base, those are pretty accurately represented. So we've got a pretty good relationship with the media to be able to keep you informed on what's going on here. But there are a lot of pre-decisional things that we don't necessarily know what the final numbers will look like. In fact, this week, a collection of all the 4 stars and 3 stars called Corona is going on, where they set the near term and the far term strategic future for the United States Air Force. So within the next month or so, we would expect to see some other changes coming out from that. We routinely get questions about locality pay, and what that is for your federal civilians. There are 54, maybe 56 today, special locality pay areas where the Bureau of Labor Statistics collects data and says, hey, look, the industry is basically beating us. It is, and they're beating us by more than 10% over the last 3 years. And so we need to locally adjust their rates. In places like San Jose or Denver, that sits at about 30%. If you're part of the rest of the US, you sit at about 17%. And then what those percentages are represent a calculation of that member's salary. And that's what you get in terms of that, that allowance, if you will, to make up for locality pay. So our salaries are set lower across the rest of the United States. Everybody gets a 17% bump, but that's how that gets adjusted. The Salt Lake area and the entire state of Utah sits in the rest of the United States. So, despite all of the economic boom and everything else here, our locality pay is still the same as you would get for locality pay if you were in like Meridian, Mississippi, which is obviously a significantly lower cost of living. And so that's something that's an issue that our national legislators and our local legislators have continuously taken on with the federal government. I've been working with this project now for about 4.5 years, and as a prime spokesman for Hill Air Force Base on this, there has been a lot of learning being done on this, but the message for everybody is that we are continuing to fight. So I've covered a lot of things here. Hopefully you got a lot out of the enhanced use lease strategy and the project that we've got. And so happy to take absolutely any questions out there. And thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate great summary of the impact that Hill Air Force Base has on our area and the state of Utah. Any questions for Michael?
I just have one, if I may. As one of the cities that's just within minutes of the base, how can we better get in touch with the right people to support maybe off-base activities, particularly in the business sector? I've talked to Colonel Cornelius many times at like COG meetings. But again, the challenge is it just seems like things are moving so fast for everyone. I just barely start to talk to him sometimes, and he's got 5 other things on his plate. So how can we get in touch with the right people of how we can support the missions of the base, especially in economic development?
So thank you. It's a great question. And that portfolio for community relations falls within our public affairs realm. And the public affairs shop is part of my portfolio. And so Tom Mulligan is the best person to get a hold of. I will get you his the phone number right now. I'll give that to everybody. Let me just look it up real quick because he's in the same building. I actually never call him. I just walk down the hall to harass him, and that's usually the best way to do it. So let me look that up real quick.
Would you mind putting your email in the chat, and I'll just correct.
I'll do that. But for everybody, if you call 801-777-2286, you can get a hold of Tom Mulligan and ask him any question, because we see him every day. We do an end of day. So any of the requests, any of the specific things that you would like, or any ideas like, hey, how do I, just like you were talking, Mayor, if how do we better connect? He can help hook you up with that. If not, you can always call me here at the headquarters, and that phone number is 801 777 7500. We're not very creative here, so 75th Air Base Wing, our number is 7500. So you can call and leave a message, or like I said, I'll put my contact information in the chat here. Feel free to email me anytime. How's that?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks very much. Any other questions?
I just want to, before, just a couple of comments. Mayor Mon, I just was doing some quick calculations, but 4% or 3.25% to 4% of your housing it is airmen or air service people, I should say. So obviously there's a big effect there, but even little things like our Clearfield Transportation Master Plan that we're doing through our Transportation and Land Connection program, we're even dealing with how does Clearfield deal with folks going back to work and those kind of things. And so, there's a lot going on inside the base, but it's also affecting a lot of the cities and outside the base. So, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that people understand that it's not just touching the inside, it's the outside as well. So.
Well, that's great. And Michael, I'm glad you brought up the enhanced lease. As a sitting MITA board member, I think we understand really the importance, economic impact of what Falcon Hill's been able to accomplish and what we will in the future with the potential. And I don't know if you mentioned, but the recent MITA project we did in Deer Valley with the Grand Hyatt, if you haven't, anybody hasn't seen that, we did that as a military hotel, but it's an amazing hotel, gives a lot of opportunity for our military, both active and non-active, that can go up there and enjoy a great facility, along with the ability to really maintain and improve buildings on the base that we didn't have before the enhanced lease took place. So I just wanted to give a shout out to our co-chairs, Jerry Stevenson and Stuart Adams, that really have been involved with MITA from the start. And we've got a great board that supports your missions out there, Mayor Michael. So anyway, thank you very much.
We are blessed. Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate that. Any other questions at all?
Mike, I don't so much have a question. I want to express appreciation for your joining us and giving us this really excellent presentation. And I'll just note, Laura and I were sort of talking about your presentation as you were giving it, and noting how Hill is essentially the size of at least a medium-sized city in Utah, with the impact that it has. You just happen to have a lot of planes also. And so I'm just so glad that you are engaging with us, and all of us want to collaborate with you in that sort of municipal, if you will, role that you play as a really big stakeholder within the region. So thank you.
You're very welcome. And again, feel free to email me or Tom Mulliken just for expectation setting. I get about 150 emails a day. It's the nature of the business. If it is something that is urgent, please feel free to call the front desk or the front office here, and we want to be responsive to you and make sure that we can get to everybody. So I appreciate everybody's time today, and happy to answer any questions offline as well. So, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Michael. Laura, appreciate your great presentation. Any other comments or other business that needs to come before this committee at this time? Now's your opportunity. Just as a word of information, our next meeting will be held Thursday, September 11th of this year. And again, I'm speaking for Marcia here, but if anybody has any pressing ideas or issues they'd like to bring forth in that meeting or presentations, please get with Marcia. We're always looking for great presentations. I think we saw 2 today that everybody can take away with some great information. So I want to just say thanks to that. Thanks to the committee. If no no other comments or questions or business, we're going to stand adjourned. Thanks very much and see you on the 11th. Thanks very much.